All right, Jimmy, we are rocking and rolling. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. I've been telling people what my sort of initial plan for this podcast was. I wanted to marry these topics of mathematics and geometry with the phenomenon or several different aspects of different phenomenon. And I didn't know how to do that originally. So I was doing that with the crop circle phenomenon because what I do is I teach geometry for a living. And I thought that was endlessly fascinating. But in the back of my mind, I wanted to take this to another level, and I didn't know how to do that. And it wasn't until I met a mutual friend of ours that I realized that there were people doing just that. And that's how I was introduced to you through our mutual friend. And then I subsequently met another friend who was doing the same thing, who we both know, who I'll have on the podcast eventually. But I wanted to get you on to talk about your work because it is fascinating and I think it's super important. So why don't we tell everybody a little bit about yourself and then we'll get into some of your work.
Well, thank you, Matt, for the opportunity. And if I can just comment briefly on what you just said, I think you had a very good instinct to get in that direction with your podcast. It was a good instinct because what we realize really is that the phenomenon or the intelligence is actually communicating information through a lot of these manifestations. So you matching and wanting to get in that direction, to go in that direction, and marrying geometry and everything else is just, I think, spot on for the time we're in right now. And that's the future, right? That's really, I think, the next step where this whole matter is going towards. So regarding my work, I'm a chemist. I do have a background in chemistry, scientific. I've done a lot of research in my early years and I've just moved on to a bit more management roles, but background in science. And as far as this work is concerned, really also a licensed amateur radio operator since childhood. One of my passion has been to build antennas, which I've done for many years, for decades actually. And really, I got sucked into this matter really. I would say a bit unexpectedly over the years, and it's more I got into it, more I discover things, and I got really again sucked in really into the subject, and it has evolved to a point where it's totally is blowing my mind really on many aspects of it. So it's really mind blowing where that's going. So it's, in a sense, I would say, multidimensional. More you dig into it, and more you can peel the onion and get deeper into layers that really it's just the imagination that's limiting us, right? It's almost limitless as more deeper we dig into the subject. So there's the surface of the matter that's a bit more nuts and bolts. Some ufology will stay more at that level, but more you dig into it and then you go deep, then it gets into things that are very profound. And that's what I will be happy to get into with you in the upcoming podcast we're going to do together.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Just so the audience knows, I have seen quite a bit of your work so far and I love following along with the mathematics of what you're doing. It is logically sound. It makes sense. And I think what your work is doing is the tip of the iceberg, which is going to unlock some new technology in the future. I think you are laying this foundation for a new mathematical framework that we can somehow use in the future to radically change the way human beings live. But I think you're planting these seeds. So it's exciting, it's fascinating, and yeah, I can't wait to share this with the audience. This is just really cool.
Very good. I'm very excited too, Matt, and thanks again for the opportunity. I have, as usual, I do have many slides we can go through. I do have videos, video clips, and all that. The first part today we're going to get through is a bit how this all started for me, how I got into this work. And when we're going to peel the onions as we go deeper into future podcast. But if you allow me, I can just get the slides going.
Yes, go do it.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you all for tuning in. If you're enjoying this episode and want to help us uncover more mysteries of the universe, don't forget to support Curious Dimension. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps get this content in front of more people who are curious just like you. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to click that notification bell too, so you're the first to know when we release new content. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to follow or subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. It helps more than you know. And whether you're watching or listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below or send me a message. Thanks for being part of the Curious Dimension community. Your support keeps this journey going.
So as I mentioned earlier, really how this all started for me, I am an amateur radio operator licensed. You need the license to do this work since childhood, really. And I've been building antennas pretty much for the better part of my life. But fast forward to 2013, I got interested in a modality called moon-bound communication. So I had never heard about this before. And it's a radio amateur modality which consists in using a lot of power to and beam this power and broadcast these radio waves and get them to bounce or scatter off the surface of the moon, literally, using the moon essentially as a passive reflector. So I didn't even know this was even possible, quite honestly. I thought it's crazy. But when I heard about it, I said, oh my God, I need to design an antenna and get equipped to try that. I found it was so amazing and cool, technically speaking, that I said, I need to do this. I said, okay, I wanted to meet the challenge. So I ended up building my antenna systems, build homemade antenna systems. And these are not the kind of antennas you can buy at Walmart, obviously, right? So it's such a unique modality that there are manufacturers that sells them. They're extremely expensive, and I wanted to design something unique as well. So ended up, we see on the right side, that was one of the models that I use in California on top of my house. As you can see, the antenna system was as large or as long as my own home. Huge, a very powerful system.
How long is that? How long is your antenna system?
Yeah, they are like in the 30, 35 foot long, depending on. Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What was your neighbor's reaction when you had this thing on top of your house?
Yeah, it was a bit an attraction. People are walking down the street and just stopping literally and looking at it and going crazy. The kids also had fun watching it. And
that's awesome. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, this is good. And the thing also I spent hundreds of hours, I think, on the rooftop of my home, because just also when there's wind, just to get that to stay intact, and you need to be secured, and it was a huge challenge, to be honest. But anyway, these antenna systems, they are called Yagi antennas. So they are directional antenna, essentially, that they focus your radio wave like a laser, if you will, right? So you have to have a rotator system to direct the antenna in the direction of a target. Right. And in my case, the target was the moon, obviously. So I have a very sophisticated system to orient the antenna in elevation and azimuth to target whatever I want to target. But in that case, I was targeting the moon.
Can I ask one quick question before we go any further?
Yes, sir.
So you're using this modality of moon bounce communication. Is the idea that you focus the radio wave, send a transmission, it bounces off the moon and then comes back to the Earth? Or can you bounce it off the moon and send it anywhere? Where exactly are you trying to send it?
It's an excellent question. So I'm going to show a slide, actually, just to answer.
I'll let you go.
So, and just a note, to the antenna we see to the left side is the model I'm using now in Arizona, which I'm operating on 2 frequency, 144.1 megahertz. So the system is capable of deploying about 150,000 watts of radiated power, which is an amazing amount of power. And for the system on 432 megahertz is capable of deploying over 250,000 watts of radiated power. So this is a lot of power. And that power is needed because, as to answer your question, so really the bouncing the radio wave of the moon is for the radio wave to, it's essentially scattered in all direction in space.
Okay.
But a very small portion of it will get back towards Earth. And then that's how you can establish a two-way communication with another radio station doing the same thing that has that equipment.
Got it.
This is how I started getting equipped to do this kind of work. At the time, I was not doing any ET or communication for extraterrestrials or anything. It was purely for amateur radio. So for the better part of 2013, and I kept upgrading my antenna system, getting more powerful radio and amplifier. Up to, and I had the opportunity to also, my system was unique. It was a triangular shaped configuration that had very unique property, a very pure radiation pattern. The opportunity to write scientific papers about it, and it made the cover page of a magazine here we see to the left side, a German magazine that has a worldwide distribution. I had a lot of fun doing this. And then in 2017, so that's where there was a big turning point in my story here. I have been interested in the universe since childhood. I used to read astrophysics books when I was a teen, and I was always fascinated by the universe. I always knew we were not alone, right? It just didn't make sense to think that we were alone. And I was always a believer in the extraterrestrial presence here, and it just made sense to me. And I had my own mystical experience too. I had a lot of out-of-body experience also since childhood and experienced different things. So anyway, in 2017, I had seen some videos of people doing what we call CE5 or human initiated contact. Dr. Stephen Greer is very known for it, and there's other platforms that promote this contact modality. And I got interested, and I said I wanted to try it. I found it really cool. I had seen some videos of sightings and stuff like that. And I said, okay, why not using my radio station to encode a message and broadcast the message and try this contact modality. So I had all this very powerful radio stations. So I decided to do that. I ended up, at the time, actually, I intended to create a group, a C5 group, because most people do it with a bunch of people, a group of people. And I had identified a location somewhere very deep into Rose Valley, California. It was about an hour drive from my home. And I said, okay, I'm going to go screen or vet this site. And before going there, I created a binary code message, which I broadcasted towards space, towards the planets, the sun, the moon, planets in our solar system. And that message was essentially a message, a greeting message, inviting any intelligent extraterrestrial species to meet me at a certain place at a certain time and date, right? And so that's the location I had identified. So I had the coordinates, the latitude, longitude, which I included in the message, along with the date and time that I will be at that site. Again, I was going to kind of screen or vet the site for future contact work. So that's what I ended up. And I actually have the original audio, the video of that transmission. So I can play it here.
Yeah, let's do that for the audience.
Yeah, and you're gonna hear it was a unique also encoding. I had it was all homemade, so I encoded every sentence of that message at a different solfeggio frequency. So we can see here on the thing like 639 hertz, 528, 417, 396 hertz. So these are all solfeggio frequency. For each sentence of the message was encoded at the solfeggio frequency in binary code. So let me play it out, and what you're gonna hear is what I broadcasted with my radio station.
Okay.
So that gives an idea. Hopefully you could hear the sound.
Yep. So that's your binary code that you are sending out. And did you tell us which direction you pointed your radio telescope at to send this?
Yeah, I sent it towards different planets in our solar system. I don't remember exactly which one, but the planets that were visible at the time of the transmission, and towards the sun and the moon. And I broadcasted, I have to say, this message a few days prior to going to the site, right? So give them time, if you will, to process it. And quite honestly, Matt, I had absolutely zero expectation that anything would come out of this. I was doing it for fun. Why not doing it? And there was no expectation for me. So I ended up, so May 1st, 2017 was the date that I had designated, which was part of the message. So I ended up driving in that late evening to that location in Rose Valley, California. It was a site right next to a small lake, very small lake, beautiful site, very far from any human installation or interference, which was the purpose, obviously, not have any kind of light interference. It was so deep in the valley that there was no cell signal either. So it was free of interference. So I got there and I found the place perfect for future contact work. And I set up a chair and I sat down and I said, okay, after 10, 15 minutes, I said, I'm going just to relax a bit, close my eyes, relax a bit, meditate, and then I'm just going to go back home. So I had brought with me an handheld radio that I had tuned to the same frequency that I had broadcasted the message with my large radio station. And I put the radio on the rooftop of my car, and I sat in a chair, and almost immediately, maybe a minute or two after, the radio started going off and interacting like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't make sense to me because I had been using this radio for a long time to do satellite communication and all kind of transmissions. And the radio had never behaved this way before. And it was a very an unusual pattern, very unusual interaction, if you will. But quite honestly, at the time, I was so much not expecting anything to come out of it that I didn't make the connection that this could be some kind of reply back or anything. So I got annoyed actually after a few minutes. I said, why is the radio just noisy that way? That I didn't click. And I have actually a video, and I can show the video of how the radio interacted like that night. So I can play it out.
Yeah, for sure.
So here we go.
It's 2:16 in the morning. The radio is very active right now.
So this is how the radio was behaving.
So can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't know anything about radios, but it looks like it's chirping there, going in and out. Is that at all normal at all in any, have you ever seen that before do that? Like if you're near like an airport or something like that, would it ever do that normally?
Yes and no. So what a radio will do is if you are, let's say you take a radio and you put it, let's say next to a router, a Wi-Fi router, right? It can does like it can pick something up and to trigger the noise canceller, if you will. There's a kind of a silencer to eliminate this that we will normally hear, that the noise. So if you receive something, you could hear some kind of noise, if you will, that is the result of the radio being triggered by a source of interference.
Okay.
Let's say again a Wi-Fi router or anything like that. But what you will hear is more like something really
trying to get through.
Yeah, something when it's, let's say you tune up in your car your radio to an FM station, that when there's no radio station, you just hear like this FM noise, white noise, right? That's what you would normally hear.
But
now this
that
what we see
seemed more like chirping though. That was like chirping, like almost like intervals.
Yes, it was that, and that's what made that interaction different. It was very sharp, very modulated, very sharply modulated, right? Precisely. And also there was something that I noticed, that because normally when you receive an actual radio wave that triggers a radio, you're going to get a signal that's going to show up. The radio is going to show the signal level, right? There's a little indicator in the corner of the screen, and we could not see that when these interactions happen. So the radio was interacting, but there was no radio wave triggering it. That makes sense, right? So it was very different. But at the time, I just did not make the connection. I could have never believed like this would happen this way. So I picked up, after a while, I got annoyed. I took the radio anyway, pack everything back up, and went back home. But I was intrigued by I didn't understand. I was thinking about it after the fact. I said, why did the radio behave this way? And I started going online on site about CE5 and watching videos, and then they were mentioning that often the intelligence will interact with the electronic equipment. Some use detector, like magnetic detector, stuff like that. Typically
magnetometers.
Magnetometers. That's where I was looking for. And so often they do C5 and they bring these magnetometers and it triggers it. And then I got in touch with people doing the work, and clearly I realized that maybe this was some kind of interaction, but again, I had a hard time processing it. So during that week, I was in town. I kept the radio clipped on my belt, and while I was going to the grocery and the bank, and while you're in town, while there will be interference, I wanted to see if the interference in a city will actually trigger the radio the same way. And nothing happened. The radio stayed completely silent. Wherever I was going, where there would normally be interference that could trigger the radio has a silencer again, and nothing happened. completely silent. And then that really got me more curious, because I say, why in the middle of nowhere, deep in the valley, when there's nothing around, not even cell signal, the radio behave this way, while in town where there's all kind of interference, it's completely silent, right? That makes sense.
Right.
So I ended up wanting, of course, repeating the experience. So a few days later, I broadcasted again a message using the same approach, date and time, and I went back to the site. And I was with a friend that time. And so we got to the site and we got set up. And a few minutes later, exactly the same thing happened. The radio started behaving the same way.
So you turn the radio on, nothing's happening, and then a few minutes later, you start to get the same chirping modalities.
Exactly. And then it became very obvious that there was some kind of intelligence behind it, because we were asking questions and the radio there seemed to be answering in some way via this interaction. It was a very strange experience, very unique, but then I understood that what was going on. And so this is how my work started. Then I got so fascinated that I was going to that site almost every week, but I ended up not doing the work with the group because people don't show up and it was complicated to schedule. People can't.
Right. You just went for it.
Yeah, I just went for it. It became a very personal experience to me. I didn't want to be limited by anyone else doing this work. So I ended up doing it almost every weekend, going there. And I purchased a night vision camera also, and I started having sightings. Amazing experience. One time I was standing up next to my car facing there was a little patch of forest behind me, behind the lake, and I was standing there and the entire forest just lit up as if there was a huge spotlight coming from above.
Oh, wow.
For 2-3 seconds. Then just went dark again. And it's crazy because I was there alone in the middle of nowhere, right? It's a very unique experience when you're by yourself
That
at
would have
night.
scared me.
Yeah, and the thing, I was never scared. And I don't know why, but I was never scared ever once. And I've done this work. I was there like sometime at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, by myself alone at night in the middle of the nowhere, really. And I never got scared.
That's good. That's probably leaves you more open to having an experience.
Yeah, probably. Then I have also, over time, I've learned, I got really good at it, and I bought multiple radios. I started with one, I ended up buying more than one radio. And something really fascinating was happening is that the intelligence was able to interact or control each radio independently from one to the other, while they were all tuned at the same frequency, right? One would think normally, if things follow the regular rules of the laws of physics, if you receive radio wave and the radios are all identical and set to the same frequency, if it will be regular radio wave, all the radios should behave exactly the same way, right? You should hear the same thing. But it's not what was happening. Each radio was acting completely differently than the others, with different energy signature, which I ended up calling these things energy signatures, which completely breaks the laws of physics. And that's where I started understanding that these interactions were not driven by regular radio waves. They were driven by some other form of energy that we don't know. And I even did experiments. Since I am an amateur radio operator, I do have testing equipment. So I tested what was happening, and again, no radio wave. I even put some of these radios in Faraday cage. Where,
can you explain to the audience what a Faraday cage is, just so they know?
Yeah, so Faraday cage is like microwave, for instance, is a Faraday cage, right? Because if you put food in your microwave and you turn it on, you can watch your food, and you're not going to get fried by the the microwave. So the Faraday cage does not let any radio wave or microwave go in or out, right? It keeps it contained. It's isolated.
So there's no possible way you could have a cell service in there. There's no other wave modalities that could reach the device that's picking up anything.
That's correct. And even while putting a radio in a microwave, the interaction still happened, right? Didn't make sense, right? Again, this energy that we don't
something
understand,
else.
It's something else. It's not radio wave. It's something else, and clearly, it's not stopped by any Faraday cage type of apparatus. So it was amazing. I do have a video of it, actually. So what you're going to see here is I had made a message that destined to the Galactic Federations. And so I broadcasted the message, and I had 3 radios set on a table in my backyard. So I broadcasted and went immediately to my backyard and turned on the radios. And this is what happened after broadcasting the message. So what you're going to see is the actual message. See a picture of the message. We're going to hear the audio of the message. The audio is what my radio broadcast to space. And the visual, you'll see the actual message. It's actual picture of the message. And then you will see what happened with the radios. So let me play this.
So Jim, oh, sorry, never mind. Wow. 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 Let me ask you a question here. Again, like I said, I don't know anything about radios, but that seems like if you're getting some sort of, if you're picking up something, shouldn't they all be doing the same thing if they're all standing right next to each other?
And precisely. And that was exactly the purpose of these experiments, where I had identical radios set to the same frequency. And so this was, to me, an experiment that gave me evidence that whatever was interacting had nothing to do with radio wave. And furthermore, I will challenge anyone to try to replicate this, right? If you look at the radio to the right side, the speed at which it's going on and off, it's unmatchable. I've never been able to replicate anything like that, because if you trigger the radio, it's going to go very slow. It has a delay that's
a lag time.
Yeah, there's a big lag time. It takes 2 seconds before the light goes on and off. And now it's just unmatchable, right? These interactions are not replicable. You cannot replicate them.
The other question I had was, you must have some sort of software that converts a message that you want to send into binary into those frequencies. Is that correct?
Yes. So what I did here, I will show the previous slide. Well, actually, we saw it in the video. So we saw at the beginning a picture, right? So I do have a software called Photo Sounder. Anyone can find it on the net. It's not a very expensive software, maybe $25 to $30. And what it does, it's quite fascinating. You can upload a picture, let's say your own picture. You load it, and then you can select the min and max frequency that you want to encode that picture and the time. And the software will turn this picture into an audio file within the parameter or the frequency that you designated. So this was perfect for me, because what I ended up doing, we're creating these like postal card message, if you will, right, with pictures and text and whatever I wanted in it. It's like a postal card. And I was able to encode these messages into an audio file that I was then able to broadcast with my radio station, right? Because a radio station does not broadcast images, right? It broadcasts sounds, essentially, right? The form of sound. So it was an effective way, because initially I did like binary code, but binary code was a bit to me limiting because I didn't know how to encode a binary code for a picture, for instance. It's been more complex, but I ended up using this software and turning any message essentially in an audio file, which was very practical. The other thing also I've learned then was that I could actually, I didn't need my large radio station anymore. I could broadcast these messages using this handheld radio, and I was getting the same replies. So in some way, the intelligence was able to pick up and decode these messages through these handheld radios as well. And I'm going to explain the physics of it in a second, why that's even possible. And the other thing that I did at the time also, when I had my first experience, I shared that with the people doing C5, and this became very known and utilized worldwide. So I've been in touch since with many contact groups worldwide, in Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, of course, US, Canada, everywhere, for people doing this work, and they're starting doing the same thing and using this modality with great success. People were sending me videos of the interaction of the radio, but also the sightings that was happening in the sky, because often there was clearly correlation, right, happening. So it became like it snowballed this way. And the physics of it is very simple, actually. When let's say all the satellites in space right now that are giving us television and GPS and all kind of services, they broadcast with milliwatts of power, sometimes in a few watts, maybe 1 watt or 5 watts of power, which is the power that a handheld radio like that has. But because they are in space, there's no obstructions between the satellite and the Earth. You don't need a lot of power. You need almost nothing, right, really, to get your voice heard in space. So essentially, when you broadcast a message with a handheld radio, your signal, the radio wave, will physically reach, they will go as far as the moon, for instance. There was a satellite, a Chinese satellite that was launched back in 2014. And this satellite, this probe actually by the Chinese, was going to the moon and back. And they had equipped this probe. I don't know if I have the slide. I had a slide normally, but they had equipped this probe with a transmitter, which had only 1 watt of power. And throughout the trip of that probe going to the moon and back, this probe was transmitting telemetry messages that we could decode from Earth. And many amateur radio operators like me and others were equipped to do moon-bound communication with very sensitive radio station and antennas. We're able to pick up that signal throughout the entire trip going to the moon and back, which was an evidence that even with 1 watt of power, we can hear that signal from the moon and back.
Wow.
So we can extrapolate that to what I was talking about, that even with a small handheld radio like we see here, when you transmit, not only your signal will reach the low Earth orbit like satellite and high Earth orbit, the signal can go as far as the moon. So if there are non-human intelligences out there, they will absolutely be able to pick up that signal. And we can just imagine, even now with the avenue of artificial intelligence, which is amazing, we can just imagine what an ET civilization has developed in terms of artificial intelligence. They may have, and that's what I believe happened with my transmissions. I do believe that they have technology that will pick up any signal that emanates from planet Earth, and these signals are automatically detected, decoded, acted upon if it's safe and appropriate for them to do, if they want to do it, right? Then their artificial intelligence, the AI, has the capability to do that. So I understood that when I broadcasted the message the way I was doing it, it's very likely that these signals were picked up by maybe more than one civilizations, actually, many of them that have these AI systems, and they can decode and detect instantly anything that is being transmitted from Earth, right, that they may have an interest into. So with even the technology we have today, and what they explained with the radio wave that you travel very, very far in space, and the AI, it's very easy now to understand why we could get some kind of reply from non-human intelligences. It makes complete sense.
Yeah, interesting.
And then I've used this, and again, people from all over the Earth, the world, have used the modality since. And it can be used for a lot of different purposes. And I'm going to explain some of the experiments that I did over the years. Now, obviously, we can send requests for sightings, interactions in the sky, which I do have hundreds of footage and pieces of pictures of interactions that happen as a result of these transmissions. I'm going to show some a bit later. Some of it, even for healing purposes, as incredible as it sounds, many people, experiencers, including myself, have experienced healing using this modality. So, for instance, to give a concrete example, I've played a lot of ice hockey. I'm Canadian, French Canadian. That's where my French accent is coming from Quebec, Canada originally. I've played a lot of ice hockey in my life, especially in my early years, and I had developed a lower back pain as a result of that. And so I had an episode in 2000, it's probably in the 2018 time frame, that I had a lot of pain in my lower back. And I had episodes like that coming and going, but you can never get rid of it when you have the kind of back
nagging
pain.
injury.
Yeah, it stays for your life. But anyway, I was in pain at one night, and I took my handheld radio and I transmitted in Morse code, because I know how to do Morse code manually. An amateur radio operator, so I know the code. And I transmitted the request for healing, for help, just to alleviate the pain. And I had no expectation of anything, but it was more of an experiment, if you will. And so I went to bed that night, and I had a lot of sweating, as if I had fever, if you will, throughout the night. And then I woke up the next day, the back pain was completely gone. It never came back since.
Really? Yeah. Did you have an out-of-body experience that night?
I don't remember having one. I don't remember, but I'm going to talk about out-of-body experience in a second. But yeah, so again, a lower back pain does not go away like that overnight, right? It never happens, right? Something clearly happened. And I do have, as I said, testimonial from other experiencers that I've gone through that kind of experience as well. So, and as a matter of fact, over time with my large radio station, I offered people who had healing or health issues to broadcast a message on their behalf asking for healing. And I've done it multiple times over the last few years, people who had cancers or going through very serious health issues. I put together a very customized message with their coordinate where they live and asking for help from whatever intelligence is out there. And I've had incredible report. There's one person that actually had the cancer, and the cancer never came back, went away and it never came back. So again, it's hard to prove that it's because of it. How do you prove that? But there's enough.
You've got some anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, we can call it this way. And one thing that came up that now convinced me that this was more than anecdotal evidence. In 2019, I decided, since I had OBE, out-of-body experience, since childhood, uncontrolled, I was not able to control these experiences. And when that happened, I decided to broadcast a request asking for the intelligence to induce an out-of-body experience and leave a physical memory of it, so I could remember what happened. So
interesting.
It was again a kind of an experiment, and once again I was really not expecting anything. And the same day that I made this broadcast, so I broadcasted this request in the afternoon with my large radio station. And at night, it was about 9 o'clock at night. I was in my bedroom. I was fully awake and aware, so I was not sleeping nor in my bed. I was just like sitting on my bed and just about to go to bed. My eyes were open. I was fully awake and aware like we're now. And all of a sudden, I was just literally, I was separated from my body, if you like, what you will experience when you have an out-of-body experience. But I was fully conscious. I was not sleeping. That's the thing that was unique about it. So that was quite yeah, it was a shocker.
That's got to be a little bit, that's got to be a little scary.
Actually, I was not scared because it was a pleasant experience. I saw what people will describe when they have a NDE, like a near-death experience. They see a big bright light in front of them and this feeling of love. And I had a feeling of going back home, actually. But I could feel, I knew I was out of my body. I opened my arm, my etheric arm, if you will, not my physical arm, but my etheric arm to the experience. And then after a very short period of time, I just blacked out, and I don't know what happened after. But the experience happened, right? This was a powerful confirmation to me, validation that these transmissions are received, decoded by the intelligence, and they are acted upon in a very precise way, because they executed very precisely what I had requested.
Look, that is wild. If I'll tell you right now, if I had done that and I'd had these lead up experiences to what you're having, and then you said, okay, let's try to do something a little bit more specific, and then it actually goes down the way you requested it, that's more than a curiosity. That's starting to tread in the realm of there's really something happening here.
Yeah.
And I know that wasn't the last thing you experienced. Your story kind of progresses, and we're going to get to all of that, but that's a profound little aspect of something you experienced. That's strange, right?
Yes. And this experience, to me personally, in my entire life, was one of the most profound, life-changing experience, because now it was not only looking at seeing sightings, and it was physical, right? It was my being, my energy being interacted with. Exactly. So that's different ball game. But gave me confirmation that, again, these requests are clearly received, decoded, acted upon if they decide to do so. All these healing requests I've done for people, and all these sighting or requests for interactions, I understood that the same mechanism applied, and clearly it all made sense, right? And the physics of it makes sense. So I've tried different things. I tried sending Morse code, binary code, even music. Sometimes I've had an experience one day that I was in my backyard and I was broadcasting Symphony Number 5 Adagietto. I love that kind of music. And during the transmission, there's an orb that just flew over my house, a huge glowing orange orb, big, going very slowly, like almost at the rhythm of the symphony that I was broadcasting. So I was absolutely stunned. And I said, okay. Then I repeated the experience maybe an hour later, and the same thing happened again during the transmission. This orb flew over.
So what distance are we talking about here?
It's impossible to know because there's no point of reference, right?
Okay, so we don't know how big it is or how far away it is, but you did the experiment twice and you saw it twice.
Yeah, I will estimate based on my experience, because I've done thousands of hours of Skywatch with night vision, and I've became very expert in the monitor. I always had an app, a software to track satellites. So when I do contact work, I always have I have a very sophisticated system where all the satellites and the rocket bodies, or that is in the NORAD inventory, they all program in the software. So when I see something in the sky, I check on my app to make sure it's not a satellite, right? Because there's a ton of them there. So I do it in a very disciplined and scientific way to eliminate any possibility of false positive, right? I'm doing really my best to
know what's in the sky. Is it something prosaic, or is there something extraneous here coming into your purview?
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Excellent.
So I do have an example. So I'm going to show this. It's about 5 minutes video. It's a compilation of sightings I've had and experiences. And what we'll see here, and some of them are during daytime, which also eliminates satellites that happen during daytime. And so what you will see at the beginning of this video is a broadcast that I made a request. I had actually requested specifically for a daytime sighting. And do you want to ask a question?
This is crazy. All right, go ahead. I love it.
Yeah, so I requested a daytime sighting, and I had programmed, or in the message, indicated the coordinate, time, and date of where I wanted it to happen, because I was working at the time in Santa Barbara, California. And every lunchtime, I was going to do a little hike. I was taking my lunchtime, instead of eating, was going to hike along the ocean. And that's the location where I had indicated for the sighting. And one afternoon, or at noontime, I got there, I looked up in the sky, and this object was right in front of me. And that object stayed there for over an hour and a half.
Wow.
Interacting with me. It was an incredible experience. And so you will see it at the beginning. So you will see the transmission and the daytime sighting. And then, even because it was close to the airport, I have a shot where we see an airplane going underneath the object, and we see the object above. So it's pretty cool. And then we'll see also a lot of daytime sightings, nighttime orbs, and interactions, and objects flashing at me. And so maybe let me play this video, if you will, and we'll keep going from there.
What?
Yes. What? State. Everything with.
Wow.
With you. So that is pretty cool, Jimmy. All right, couple questions.
Yes.
When you're sending the message out to the Andromedan Council and friendly civilizations, are you just sending that out like a broad message? Like, how do you know to direct it towards an Andromedan Council? Is that just going off of something you heard before, or why would you pick that?
Yeah, good question. I've researched the subject over the years, and they're very credible experiencers with communicated message to humanity, and they stated being in contact or having received these messages on behalf of these councils. So
Mhm.
again, I do not have a personal experience with these guys or these councils, but there's
Mhm.
evidence out there that they exist and they've been interacting with humanity for a long time. And so what I'm broadcasting, as you said, is really a broad message addressed to
Mhm.
whatever of these councils or groups that may be out there watching us. So it's
Okay.
pretty broad.
Now, some of the footage you showed there, some of those objects were changing trajectory and moving oddly, but some of them did have kind of a steady pace. Did you do the same thing in post where you checked the sky maps to see if there were any satellites going by to make sure the skies were clear?
Yeah, every single time. I never put something on the internet or on my YouTube channel without having did it. So it's always vetted. And the other thing also is when you get experience with doing Skywatch, after the sunset, maybe 3-4 hours after sunset, the Earth, or what we see essentially, falls in the Earth shadow, right? The satellite falls in the shadow of the Earth. And so at a certain period of the night when it's really late, let's say after 4 hours after sunset, it is impossible to see satellite because there's no light to reflect against. The sun is being hidden by the Earth. So it cannot be satellite.
Okay.
And the high Earth orbit satellites, or at 30,000 kilometers in space, you cannot see them. They are so far away. They are not visible with the naked eye.
Okay.
So you develop that knowledge at some point when you do Skywatch. Again, I use my app and I use this knowledge, and many of these sightings occurred at a time at night that the satellites are not visible. And you see it on the app because the satellite becomes grayed out. They gray out at that certain time when they fall in the Earth shadow. So there are techniques like that to vet what you're seeing. And it's so anomalous what you're seeing, and it's so sometimes interacting with you, right? Flash and stuff like that is just,
Right. It's one thing to see it on camera, but when you're seeing it with your own eyes, it probably hits a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like going to the Grand Canyon, right? If you go to Grand Canyon, when you're there, it's like a moving experience. But if you take a picture, it was just doesn't reflect at all what you see.
It's not the same thing. And this is also happening within a relatively short amount of time after you're sending a broadcast out.
Yeah.
So so it seems like this is like some kind of a response.
Yeah,
to what
and
you're
I do have
sending out
video.
there.
Totally, I do have video. For instance, sometimes I'm using a laser, and I'm pointing at the location in the sky, and exactly where the laser is pointing, there's a flash there that started happening.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and I have video of it, right? I have a ton of
Right.
videos. I can show it next time, maybe. But what of the odds that you got a satellite, and the satellite moves in space to maintain their orbit? They need to go at 25,000 miles an hour to maintain their orbit. So when you have a stationary object flashing at you, it cannot be a satellite. It just doesn't add up. And then you get all the daytime sighting, which again cannot be satellites, and it's easy to vet because there's no visible planet the sky during at noon, for instance. You can see maybe the moon sometimes when during the moon is very bright, but it's easy to see if it's the moon or not. And I vetted all that. And here's an example. So if you watch the video I just showed, the sighting before last where this object was moving and then flashes.
Yes.
Okay. Again, what I'm showing are videos, they're very dry, but there's an experience behind it. So in that case where this object was flying over my house, literally, because I ended up doing this work, by the way, from my backyard. After a while, I realized I didn't need to go deep in a valley to do this work. I could just stay in my backyard, and these objects were coming my way and interacting with me. But when this object flew over, as incredible as it sounded, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but as it was passing over, I said 3 words. I said, "Flash at me," in my head, if you will. And 2 seconds after I said that, the object produced this enormous flash.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a coincidence to me. I've never seen anything flash in the sky, and I go out every night and I look at the sky. I've never seen anything fly by and just make a weird flash. Like that seems pretty strange.
Yes, it is. And I was shocked actually because again, it's right. We know our brains are transmitter of radio wave, right? So whatever we think, there's a something that comes out of our bioelectric field. And so maybe these things are detected the same way. And so again, there's this physics behind it. All right, so I'm going to go through the last section here. I don't want to take too long, but so I ended up in 2021, I ended up moving to Arizona, and I brought my radio station with me, obviously. And then I did something that was a bit a turning point too, is that I installed cameras on my radio, on my antenna system. So we can see here to the right side, the camera system, I installed more than one because I wanted to have some redundancy, because if I could detect something in the sky, if you have a separate system, you can confirm that it's not a camera glitch or anything like that. So you have two different technologies saying the same thing. And to the left side is my radio shack where I'm currently sitting as we speak. So I equipped my antenna system with cameras, and then I realized that while I was broadcasting messages, in this case, for instance, was the moon, I got these incredible sighting and manifestations happening in the sky during the broadcast.
Wow.
And what we see here is we'll see a chemtrail, right? This is the moon, so I was directing towards the moon. And then we see these two objects, these are not bugs, obviously. We can see there's geometry to this. I calculated the angle. Is a 45 degrees angle. We see it's very defined. This one looks a bit more like a typical saucer, right? That we see, but clearly a very unique shape. This was on the solstice, actually. December 21st was the solstice, winter solstice, 2021. And then I started having many of these amazing sightings. And this one occurred on May 31st, 2022. This one was very special too. And I have the video actually of all these experiences.
You can see them appearing and disappearing, correct?
Yes. And I'm going to show one in a second here. But so this one was actually an experiment. So what I did, I was transmitting a tone, and we see here to the left side, a tone of the frequency 161.8 hertz. So it's the golden ratio frequency. It was a test. So I said, I'm going to broadcast the golden ratio frequency and see if this would trigger any kind of reaction. And during the broadcast, this incredible triangular shape just popped in and out of a dimension. I captured it on video camera, and here we go. So these are not satellite, right? Again, this just, you know, a different sighting here, all kind of objects. I don't know exactly what it means, right? But it's just happening during the broadcast. Again, towards the moon here, these two UAP just showed up. This armada or flotilla of craft just.
What is that? That looks pretty strange in the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
clearly an object.
Yes, I was broadcasting towards Vega. We see the trees here. My antenna was, and again, if I broadcast towards, let's say, Vega or whatever, I'm not really I'm not saying that it's a ship from Vega that shows up, right? It doesn't really matter to me. I think
you're saying that's where the transmission.
Yeah. I think that I was transmitting towards something that I could recognize in the sky. Sometimes we see Arcturus or Vega or the Orion belt, and so that's what I was targeting. And I got all these incredible sightings. This one as well. You see these three objects showing up. This one was really special. It felt like these four objects were matching the shape of lambda.
Very interesting.
It's very interesting. And then this is where there was a turning point, because I started realizing that, for instance, this craft, or this triangular shaped craft, I call the golden ratio triangle craft. I realized, and we'll talk about it more in the next episodes, but I realized that these sightings contain information, geometrical information, and we'll see that next time. But with free ratio, for instance, any side of this triangle by any other side, in whichever way we do it, we always get the golden ratio or the golden ratio squared. It was really fascinating to me. When I found out about it and I did the calculation, I said, wow, that's amazing. So I ended up creating a message where I was showing that I understood what they were saying with the golden ratio. And so I made a request for them to manifest again, right? So I was essentially sending my homework back to them and say, I figured it out. Here's the picture of what you're sending me. Can you manifest again? And so let me show you this brief video. It's pretty short, but it's going to show what happened here when I broadcasted this message. So
this is so cool.
Great.
Oh, that's crazy. This is really where we get into the work that I am so utterly fascinated by, because these triangular craft that you're calling them, or these positions here, I've done some of the math that you've shown here using the law of sines on this, and if your measurements are correct, this does show golden ratio triangles. And maybe just for the audience, we should just explain real quick what the golden ratio is in case anybody doesn't know. This is the ratio that emerges from the Fibonacci sequence, and it also emerges from how things grow in our bodies and in nature. It's a quite universal ratio. And if you were communicating with some other form of non-human intelligence that's not necessarily from here, the language would be geometry. The language would be mathematics. And this really gets to the heart of what I love about these topics. And here we go, have somebody doing this. It's pretty wild. And I hope we can get into the weeds in this, maybe in a future podcast, but this is really cool.
Yes, yeah, it's fascinating. And so to me, that's why I was saying at the beginning of your show that I really think that you got the right instinct to go in the right direction with this, because they are here, right? They are clearly communicating information about this stuff in a geometrical
It's
way.
a recognition.
And yes, it is. And we'll discuss another time more in the details, but this really leads to a physics, a new way, a new perspective on science and our physics, which is stunning, and which is also this geometry and the information encoded in these sightings, as we'll see, is actually encoded in many ancient sacred sites around the world, like in the Great Pyramid of Giza and all over the world. And so there's remnants of this sacred knowledge, of this forgotten knowledge in some way. Some of it probably has been suppressed purposely. Some of it's just been forgotten. And it's like they are putting it back in our face to remember this science, this physics that's so transformative. So this is where I'm at for tonight. I have a last short video here, which lasts about 3 minutes, that I can show, which is a demonstration. So I've done many of these broadcasts over the years now. And in this particular example, I was broadcasting towards the Orion Belt. It was December 16th, 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And during this 25-minute broadcast, so what I'm broadcasting typically now is when I made discoveries, I find something about geometry or mathematics that's encoded. I create slides and I encode these slides and I'm broadcasting them back towards the universe, like broadcasting back my homework, if you will, letting them know that I figured something out, and then I'm waiting for the next batch of information for them to send out. So that broadcast was primarily that and some other messages of just regular invitation message to interact and things like that. And during that broadcast, there were 16 manifestations that occurred during that 25-minute period. And what these are typically are flashes. You see these kind of object just flashing right in front of me at different location in the sky. And one of the object we'll see is stationary. It's always stayed at the same position and will flash nine times during that 25-minute broadcast. Again, it's stationary, cannot be a satellite, right? There's no satellite that are stationary. And also the time at which the again, the sighting took place here was late at night, that there was, again, no visible satellite. They were all falling in the Earth's shadow. So I made a condensed version of this experience, like it's just a 3 minutes condensed version, but we'll see. I'm moving, you'll see really how I do it. I move the antenna, I direct it towards the Orion belt. I start broadcasting, and the moment that I start broadcasting, these flashes, these ships or objects are just signaling back to me, like they're receiving my broadcast. It's a kind of two-way communication. So let me play this out. It's going to be my last video tonight. So we see here the antenna is now being positioned, being directed towards the Orion belt. And we can see the 4 antennas. The 2 of them are for 144 megahertz, and the 2 in the center, the smaller one, are for 432 megahertz. So we'll see here the transmission started. So we'll see here a stationary object to the bottom left of the Orion belt immediately. We see a little flash. Here we go, taking place. So manifestation number 2 is to the right side. See another flash here. And immediately after, manifestation 3 took place right to the right of the Orion belt, pretty intense. And we can see, if we compare the brightness compared to the Orion belt stars and Betelgeuse and so on, it's pretty bright. So the stationary object came back again a few seconds later, a few minutes later, at the exact same location that it had manifested initially. And again, this cannot be a satellite or moving, obviously, very fast in space to maintain their orbit. So this is validation using camera number 2, different camera, and we see exactly the same sighting taking place. So it's a pop. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention. So again, I was using more than one camera system. So I was able to switch from one camera to the other just to show that the same sightings were taking place. It's not a camera glitch or a bug or anything. It's really real.
That is crazy. So it blinks
once.
once.
Some kind of artifact. Yes.
So it blinks once in the beginning, and then after it the other ones blink, and it comes back to that one as a stamp. No, for sure, this is happening here.
Oh yes, and I'm convinced 100% that there's information encoded in this experience, and we'll see all these 16 manifestations here. So the fact they're flashing somewhere in the sky, and sometimes they come back to that location that I call it the stationary object. Could it be that it represents a 0 and the other location represents a 1, like in a binary code, right? There's a modulation, maybe there may be a code in there, an information, and also the location where the sighting occurred. There may be geometry to this, right? So I'm going to show the map of manifestation at the end of this video, but it just shows that I'm convinced. Again, the intelligence never do anything randomly or just for fun, right? When they do something because there's important information encoded in their manifestation. I know that now. I have so many experience of it, and I'm convinced in this case, this is the case. I didn't have time, or I didn't figure it out yet. But let me play the rest of the video here. Manifestation number 5, the same, again, stationary object manifest again. And didn't move, really stayed completely stationary, which is powerful confirmation. So again, camera number 2 as a validation. Same sighting taking place. Now we're moving on to manifestation number 6. Pretty clear again. And all these took place during and or in between broadcasts, and we can hear some of the broadcasts in the background. The stationary object coming back again, same location. Number 8. This one is a moving object. It's difficult to say if it's non-human or just a natural phenomenon. And now we're moving on to the next one, which is pretty spectacular. Just popping in and out, a very strange structure, very strange configuration, as we will see here. Number 10, again, a stationary object coming back. And this object kept essentially flashing, popping in and out like that during the entire broadcast sequence, during the 25 minutes of the experience, which is quite remarkable. Now we're moving to camera number 2 as a validation. Again, we're seeing the same manifestation. Number 11, the same stationary object coming back again. Very clear. Immediately after, another one, manifestation 12. And we're moving back again to the stationary object, same location. That's number 13. Now we're transitioning to camera number 2 to validate, again, this sighting. Number 14. Very nice, very clear flash to the right side of the Orion belt. Again, these were all in the direction of the radiation that were being broadcasted, coming back to the stationary object here. Very clear shot. And now we're confirming, validating with camera number 2 that the same sighting is taking place. And now that ended the broadcast sequence. And so I turned on the light. We can see the antenna array a bit clearer. Of course, the stars had moved within the 25 minutes experience. And now we're going to go park the antenna back to their parking location. So I just wanted to share, just to demonstrate that clearly when we broadcast in space intelligent messages, we're getting replies, and there's no doubt that these messages are being heard.
You're confirming it with 2 different cameras. There's clearly flashes going on there. I'd be shocked if there wasn't some sort of relationship between those flashes. That's astounding. I think you're starting to knock on the door of something pretty profound here. And this is just the beginning. And so, like I told everybody here at the beginning, one of my main things I'm fascinated with is applying mathematics and geometry to these phenomena, and you're doing it. I think it's one of the coolest things you can study when it comes to these topics.
Yes, it's fascinating because we've been used to see and hear things about UAPs in a very nuts and bolts way, and what's very focused on the metallic part of it, the metal, right? Technology, metal, and there's more now. I'm encouraged to hear now. There's more talk about consciousness and how we can interact with these things, and they're very credible witnesses now that are coming out, right? And so again, it's a bit for the general public consumption, right? Because it's going to take some time for people to get that to really what the phenomenon is, because it's pretty deep. It's
very deep. And right now for the masses out there, they're what they probably can digest is a physical craft with a physical being coming from another star to visit us or observe us. But yeah, you're right. This subject goes way deeper, and it's, in my opinion, it's much more subtle, and it has something to do with us and our minds and our attention and our consciousness. There's something intimately intertwined in that conversation. And I don't think we fully understand that yet, but we're starting to scratch the surface.
Yes, let me give you an example. I'm going to throw you that bone before we end the show. When the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022, and you can find it on YouTube, right? It's a team who demonstrated that there's no such thing as locality, right? The universe is not local. There's no space, right? It's just, there's no time either, right? It's so many experiments shows that time is an illusion, and space as well. It's very hard for us to realize that, but it's proven in so many ways now experimentally in physics, and there's a Nobel Prize in Physics 2022 demonstrated that. Now, so if time does not exist and there's no such thing as locality, the universe is not local, this means that the broadcast that I make today may influence my past, which in turn is fed back into the present, if you will. Right? And give you an experience based on that. So when I made my first transmission in 2017, on May 1st, 2017, and I went to that site, and as of today, I still have the feeling that they already knew I was going to be there at that moment, because the interaction happened the very first trial that I did. They interacted with me, and it felt they're just waiting there. And that's wild to imagine, but our physics shows that time doesn't exist, nor space. It's an illusion created by our consciousness. So it means that what we do today as human species, but I'm going to speak specifically about my experiments, the broadcast that I'm making today may have influenced my past, may have actually maybe triggered all these out-of-body experience, and what's fed back today in the experience that I'm having today, right? So it's pretty wild, but and there are actually techniques now people use to heal themselves by going back in their past with their consciousness and modify or heal what the source of the root cause of their illness today, and they end up healing in the present by changing their past, right? Because again, time is an illusion. And so when we start thinking that way, we start seeing an entire universe and an entire set of possibilities that we have never thought before. And when we do this work, and that's what I've experienced now over time, when we start doing this work seriously, and we realize that we can communicate telepathically, our consciousness has an influence on these things and these interactions, and they send information and we send it back, and more we interact with the phenomenon, more information seems to come our way in the form of instinct or intuition or inspiration, right? It becomes a very profound experience and very transformative experience. And that's what has been happening to me since 2017, and which is not unique to me. It's available to any one of us who wants to do it. It's just a matter of opening ourselves to that reality and the infinite potential of our consciousness.
Yeah. And I've said this before in this podcast, but I think a lot of what these experiences and these phenomena are teaching us is to maybe not having us think so linearly and thinking that things just happen, that, and quantum physics is telling us that this is now more reality than what we're actually perceiving. We're not there yet. And so these experiences, I think, shake us out of that for a second and then open us up and say, hey, there's something else going on here. And the way that you're approaching reality isn't the whole picture. And so I love that about these topics, because it stretches you and forces you to think a different way, which I think is healthy and maybe moving us towards a better situation. Jimmy, this was really cool. I can't wait to do another podcast with you and start to get into the weeds of this stuff. Tell everybody where they can find you and your website, your YouTube channel. How can people see more of your stuff?
Yes, people can find me on, I do have a YouTube channel called Human Initiated Contact. If you just Google that or go on YouTube, Human Initiated Contact, you will find all my videos, my interviews. Every time I do experiments or I do have sightings, I try to document these in the form of small clips that I showed, because for me, these are very personal experience, very important experience. So I want to share. So I try to make clips that looks pretty good. I put a lot of efforts into it in documenting these experiences. And so you'll find a ton of information there. Also on Facebook, just type up my name, show up, you can send me a friend request. I do have a website, not related to the subject. It's more related to moonbounce. You'll see all my technical stuff. It's www.kk6fah.com. Kilo 6 Foxtrot Alpha Hotel.com. It's my kind of amateur radio website where I put all my radio stuff and antenna systems. And that's about it. To me, I do it for fun. It's a passion. I don't make any money with this. It's really just for the passion of it. And I encourage everyone to get into it and just try it. It's available to anyone.
Awesome. That's a great way to end this one up, Jimmy. I'll put links for all that in the description below. Want to say thanks for everybody for watching. Have a great night, everybody. Take it easy.
Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.